Okay, everybody, good morning. Today's a fun one, a little different than some of the usual neurosurgery grand rounds, but there's a very storied history here around the department and also our colleagues at the university around sports safety. Many of you know the history with the NFL with Dr. Ellenbogen and Dr. Herring. My good. Is that better? Yeah, okay. So this dates back, Rich, about 12 or 14 years now, at least. Many of you know the NFL had a huge concussion problem, and they sought out the advice of Dr. Ellenbogen and Dr. Herring, and really transformed the way we looked at sports-related concussion. And around that time, Seattle became the epicenter of all this stuff. There was a ton of activity that was going on. Not only was the work happening with the NFL, our department started to attend the sideline games because neurosurgeons now were unaffiliated neurologic consultants on the sideline. The brain injury group here too went to the state legislature and got the first law passed called the Lysted Law, which was the first law that mandated basically medical release before return to play. And we think that saved countless lives. And what's interesting about that law is it got passed here. And then again, the work of Dr. Herring, Dr. Ellenbogen got this passed with the NFL in all 50 states. So there's not seatbelt laws in all 50 states. So we think that effort alone saved, innumerable lives over the last number of years. And then we were obviously working on some of the football helmet stuff too, which was fun. So Seattle became this epicenter for sports safety during that period of time. And through the work that went on, then Dr. Ellenbogen and Dr. Herring were able to come up with this idea of launching a sports institute at the university, with the focus being around initially educating patients and families around sports safety and legislating best practices to get those safety measures in front of the public, and also working on concussion. Over the years, we've evolved sort of the mandate of the Sports Institute, and I'll talk a bit about that, but we really focus on a variety of things that involve active participation in health and safety in sports activities. And so we'll go through a few of those things today. There we go. Okay. So no disclosures. I'm not doing football helmets right now. So we're going to go through and talk about a couple different things, and some things that are getting integrated into the healthcare system at the university, and more broadly. We become very interested as an organization in mental health. There's obviously a huge mental health crisis, and we think engaging through athletics is a really great way to reach young people, and we'll go through and talk a bit about that. And then we'll update on the most recent concussion guidelines. Every few years, there's a consensus that goes on internationally, and there was one several months ago, and we'll update on that. So I wanted to introduce the team. So this institute lives within neurosurgery, but it's really very broad-based, including great colleagues from rehab pediatrics, and we're really integrated into the rest of the wider university. We work with folks in computer science and a variety of other places around campus. So I've been directing the institute for the approximately last 6 years. Dr. McDonald is the research director. Sarah Crispin's here, who's a great colleague of ours from over at Children's. She's the assistant director of community outreach for us. David's our program coordinator. He does amazing stuff. Dr. Herring really doesn't need an introduction. Stan has been a great mentor and friend for years. He co-founded the Institute with Dr. Ellenbogen and has been in rehabilitation medicine for a long time. But Stan has had a storied career working with multiple different professional sports teams. And as I mentioned, he helped get the Zachary Lystead law passed with Dr. Ellen Bogan. He sits in the Zach Lystead Endowed Chair. Cindy Lynn is here. Cindy's an amazing person who's driven a ton of the work within the Institute. She's the Director of Clinical Innovation for us when we talk about Exercise RX. Carl Landis is my partner in the Institute here. She's not here today because she just had a baby. And then Leah Cantor is our research coordinator. So the mission of the Sports Institute is to expand participation and safety in sports. And that is a pretty broad statement. And we look at everybody as an athlete. We want everybody to be more physically active. The data substantiates that physical activity is incredibly important. And I think there's a misconception that you have to, run a marathon to get benefit from exercise. And Dr. Lynn will talk more about that, but it's a big piece of what we do. So we set up 4 sort of tenets or tactics when we look at different projects or innovations that we want to bring forward. So we are a university institute. We're very focused on bringing best practices and principles. And so we're very research based. We look at, what are the best practices in an area to bring forward and educate against. If we're going to bring forward a new program, it's scientifically based. We look at innovation as a core pillar of what we're doing. We try to think a little bit outside of the box and sort of how we're bringing these ideas forward. Education remains a core piece of what the Institute was founded upon and continues to be part of the mission. So we collaborate on scientific guidelines and we work in novel ways to bring that information to the broader sports community around the United States. And then advocacy remains a huge piece of what we did. It was sort of one of the founding pillars, again, of what we did, getting that law passed. So we continue to engage broadly with the state legislature and work on various initiatives around youth sports and youth participation. So what we've typically done is we have this model where when we have an idea or some program that we want to develop, we'll initially pilot that. So we'll develop interventions with new technologies. These are all evidence-based approaches. We test these out usually locally in small pilots that we start with the idea then that we can scale these out regionally and then nationally and building coalitions and grassroots support as we do this. And we want to share that information, publicly as we go and create public forums and bring in other stakeholders. We then go and research these studies. We want to understand the feasibility, acceptability. We want to investigate the connections between physical activity and positive health outcomes. It's a big piece of what we've been doing. Understanding the cost benefits of this too. It's very clear, like with the epidemic in diabetes and you're seeing all this stuff with Ozempic, physical activity is a really key pillar in just general health. We also then try and scale, as I mentioned. So we don't think that just doing science projects for the sake of science projects is the right thing. We want to take on things that are practical and have what we think will be real impact, but we don't want to do that just locally here. We want to learn here and then expand that nationally. So we've been partnered with a lot of different folks. The Institute is fully self-funded, meaning that we are fully funded off of grants and philanthropic efforts. And we've had a lot of partnerships over time in places that have funded the work. We had an initial grant from the NFL with Dr. Ellenberg and Dr. Herring to get the Institute up and running. And then we've had a variety of other partners come forward and significant donors in the community support the work. So I'm going to pass this off to Christine for a second, and then she's going to introduce our other colleagues as we go forward. Thanks.
Well, good morning. I stand up here, I know, a few times. In this capacity, I'm here as the research director of the Sports Institute. High level, we've really kind of taken this institute, as Sam has mentioned, and thought about, ways to grow it into new realms. What does sports health and safety mean, and what does that mean to the broader community at large? One of the emphasis points we have had is really in the context of being more considerate of underrepresented populations, be more diverse, be more thinking outside the box when we think about what physical activity does and who can it most benefit. So we've had projects basically with getting kids moving more in schools through the Daily Mile. We've had projects and studies where we've actually gone into juvenile detention centers and worked with incarcerated youth through trauma-informed physical activity programs, again, to try to reach back to those who don't always get thought about when you're thinking about research at large. And then our two key initiative projects that you'll hear about today from Dr. Lynn and Dr. Chrisman. First, we'll hear from Cindy as it pertains to Exercise RX, and then from Dr. Chrisman, we'll come back up and talk a little bit more about what athlete mental health to do. So I'll turn it over to Cindy to tell us about Exercise RX. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much for the kind introductions. So I'm going to talk about Exercise RX, and this project really goes back to, I think, almost 5 years ago when Sam and I met with Shwetak Patel, along with our former research director or former director, Sarah Moseman, and we started talking about some ideas together, and really it centered around just the challenges that patients face in being active. We know that physical activity is a really important vital sign, right? It tells us a lot about how well our patients are going to do potentially after surgery, how well they're going to cope with a lot of medical conditions. And there just wasn't an easy way to prescribe and incorporate it as part of regular clinical practice. So we all got together and we came up with this project, Exercise RX. And in terms of just an overview, so like I mentioned, the overall status of Americans is that we're really inactive. About 80% of Americans don't meet the National Physical Activity Guidelines. Exercise is just not often discussed. I work in sports medicine, but even then, like we talked about, everybody is an athlete, and we need to help all patients find a way to be active that's accessible. And patients, I had patients come to me who said, hey, if you could text me at night, I promise I will go for like a 10-minute walk after dinner. And there wasn't a sustainable way to provide behavioral support for our patients in being more active when they really needed just small nudges on a very regular basis. And so we came up with some solutions really focused on this goal of improving population health through innovations in exercise and rehabilitation prescription. And we've built this over the years, really answering the voices of patients and providers that we've interviewed in depth across the healthcare system to understand, like, what are the barriers to physical activity? Why don't providers or, primary care doctors or different specialists ask about physical activity on a regular basis? And so where we are now, and I'll talk a little bit about the projects, is that we have some major grants focused around cancer care, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy at Seattle Children's, focused on improving physical activity and home-based rehabilitation in these populations. And we're also doing some pretty novel sensing work with smartphone-based, smart device-based sensing with our computer science colleagues. So what Exercise RX does is it really bridges the gap. And so where we kind of started is that, patients would come to us in clinic and they would show me their smartphones. They would show me their step counts, and it'd be like a day-to-day graph or their Fitbit information. It was really just too much information and too much, it was basically information overload. No provider has time to make sense of that and know what to do with it next. And so what we've done with Exercise RX is that we've bridged that gap by making physical activity just really distilled down to what is clinically important and relevant to me as a provider, as a physical therapist, to understand really how active is this patient and how does that affect their health. And so we've bridged that with Exercise RX by creating both a patient app and a provider dashboard, which is inside of Epic, and it's available at UW Medicine, although currently we're only using it for research, that helps to translate just really basic physical activity signals to the healthcare provider. So these are just some screenshots of the app. And so how it works is that, again, right now it's only used under research, but I can identify a patient in clinic that comes to me maybe with knee arthritis or back pain, and they're just not active enough. They can use a QR code, they download the app, and the app itself actually figures out their baseline activity and prescribes them a personalized saying like, okay, your baseline step count is about 3,000. Let's make a goal of going towards 4,000 steps over the coming few weeks. So it's really gradual, really slow and safe. This is an image of the provider dashboard, which is embedded within Epic. And basically what I can do is I can go on this dashboard every Monday and I can see my patients. They're triaged by the patients who need the most help to the top. So they're in the red. You can see the red zone, and I can send them a like or nudge that's semi-automated that says, hey, Dr. Lynn saw your step count, keep up the great work, or just giving them some really simple encouraging messages. And the feedback that we've gotten from patients is that because they knew that their care team could see how active they were, it did encourage them to be more active. And they felt like somebody cared about them, somebody was looking over their shoulder. So we're also working on, like I mentioned, the novel sensing technology with our computer science colleagues in the UBComp lab. And this is part of a project that we're doing right now with both Seattle Children's and with Fred Hutch Cancer Care Center, where we have these videos. Let me go back there. We have videos, and basically in the top right corner is actually a camera mirror as if I was doing a squat facing the camera. So it's going to actually show them while they're doing the exercise. And what's so neat about this is that it actually counts the repetitions and sets for the users, just using their own smartphone. So we don't need to give them any wearable that they stick on their body. They don't need to buy an iPad if they don't own one. They can just use their smartphone. And by using novel sensing, different kinds of sonar sensing and camera-based sensing, it can actually accurately pick up their sets and repetitions. So what this has really transformed for us who, and all of your patients are involved in rehabilitation sometimes too, after surgery, is that it's not based on self-report anymore. So usually it's a patient will come to me and say, oh yeah, I did some of those PT exercises, but you don't actually really know what they did. But this takes out the guesswork and gives you information about what are they actually completing at home in terms of their exercises. I'll try to show this video here. So this is just a demonstration of that video. Again, this in the upper right corner is would be you doing squats facing the smartphone, and this is counting repetitions and sets that are being done. And this has been really helpful for our physical therapy colleagues who've been involved in this study, because now they actually know for these adolescents with cerebral palsy, how much volume, how much activity, which exercises are they doing, and where do they need more support? Go back to this video. This one is our engineer at UBComp lab. Oh, there we go. Get the audio. Nope, it's on mute. Should I exit out of this? Let's see. Yeah. Let me see. Should I stop share to do that or? Okay. All right. I am supposed to be doing tech research, so luckily I can navigate this, I think.
Sure.
There we go.
People. As part of the XSIRX team, I developed, sensing and machine learning techniques for monitoring people's exercises and fitness through smartphones and other commodity hardware. So we start with the raw video that we record, that patients report for us, right? And so this is very exciting because this is raw video that is recorded in their own home in very natural situations. And from there, we extract 33 what we call posed landmarks. So these are basically XY coordinates of different parts of the bodies, like your nose, like your left and right shoulder, and things like that. And then from there, we plot and analyze those landmarks over time, per frame and over time. This has several advantages to it. One is that it's immediately de-identifies the person. So we can very quickly look at data more objectively, and we hope that this will ultimately provide even more personalized and detailed feedback than they get normally in the clinic. Another piece of feedback that we would ultimately love to provide to our users is the ability to tell them that you're performing your squats deep enough. So our plots here basically show the Y coordinate of the left and right hips. And we can see very clearly when someone is doing deep squats versus not deep squats. Other metric of feedback we would love to provide to the user is if they are performing exercises too fast. And so one thing that's important as part of physical therapy is the control of your motions in performing exercises, not just doing the exercises themselves. And so here we can see someone doing squats at a reasonable speed versus someone doing squats way too fast. And so if you look at the timestamp, basically we observed that they were doing something as much as 50 times faster as a reasonable speed. I think
There are teenagers in the study.
Being able to design feedback so that people can act on our sense behaviors. So this is the idea that we designing good feedback so that people can stay in the zone, right? Stay focused on doing their squats, but also get feedback that they should do their squats slower or deeper, things like that. And I think that's very exciting because it closes the loop and it will provide immediate impact on our users.
So we're so fortunate to work with just an amazing engineering team at UW, at the UBComp lab, as I mentioned, and also human-centered design and engineering. So in terms of where we are now, so we have several large grant-funded studies, like I mentioned, with Seattle Children's, with adolescents with cerebral palsy. That's why they were trying to do 50 squats per minute for fun, pushing the limits of our system. And then, as I mentioned, Bladder Cancer Advocacy Network for a 3-year randomized controlled trial on an intervention, this one in patients who are receiving treatments for their bladder cancer, including chemotherapy and surgery. And so basically we're using these home-based exercises pre-op as pre-rehabilitation and then also post-op. So this is definitely something that could be done again in other patient populations as well. And with the MS Center at Northwest Hospital focused on step count. And in terms of future directions and areas of collaboration, so we're continuing to leverage AI and ML technologies, collaborating with UW-CSE. We're creating novel and pragmatic solutions for activity monitoring and censoring. We're working very closely with UW Medicine IT to streamline ExerciseRx better with the provider workflow, just to make it even easier for providers to use it in research and beyond. And we're very happy to collaborate with other faculty across the medical center and here as well on just ways we can improve physical activity, improve patient outcomes. Thank you so much.
So one of the things that Cindy was way too humble about, and I think some of you in the room will appreciate, she got that into Epic. Period, and stop, mic drop, like we're done. Like anybody who knows anything about getting anything to Epic should be really impressed because she actually got that into Epic. That was extraordinary. What you hear is the diversity really of the potential and the integration. It's funny, Stan and I were just talking, that young man, this probably made his career. He was an engineer. He wasn't thinking about medicine, but when he gets together with his medical colleagues, look at the impact he can have and things that he can spin off into companies himself. High level, this is not just, as we've talked about, activity, but also about safety. So one of the potential applications that many are thinking about is utilization of that monitoring that Cindy just told you about, but in the context of keeping people safe so that they don't have the falls that they have in their homes when they're trying to rehabilitate. The applications to rural medicine medicine and global health, really, when you're in resource limited environments that ironically everybody has a cell phone, but not everybody potentially even has a home, that you can do things that allow experts like yourself to reach people and patients in places that we've never been able to before. So in rounding out our key initiatives, I'd like to introduce a colleague of mine, Dr. Chrisman. Sarah is a longtime collaborator and a strong contributor to the world of concussion, but has done a lot more recently in mental health. And she'll tell us about work she's been doing in athlete mental health. Sarah.
Thank you, Christine, for that nice introduction, and very happy to be here. And this is, I know, a little bit of a pivot and probably not something you're used to hearing as neurosurgeons, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about mental health. And so I'm a pediatrician and an adolescent medicine provider. And so I do a lot of research. As Christine said, I've done a lot of research around concussion, but also other areas. And I'm really interested in kind of that intersection between physical health and mental health. And so this project is really close to my heart. I was really excited to be able to work on this with the Sports Institute. So we started this project in the midst of the pandemic in 2022, and really feeling that, adolescent mental health has been on the rise for 20 years. And then during the pandemic, we've really hit crisis level. So these are numbers from the YRBSS, which is a survey that's done yearly. And that in 2021, we were seeing that 1 in 3 high school youth were reporting sad feelings of sadness or hopelessness. 1 in 5 were reporting suicidality, and very few were actually seeking care. So 1 in 10 are seeking care. And looking at this, we really said we need to find innovative ways to reach youth. We can't expect that just increasing the mental health workforce is enough. We have to go find them where they are. And our solution to this was really thinking about one of the spaces that youth are going to show up in and that there is a trusted adult is sport. And that we can find, this is a place where we find kids who are not necessarily going to be coming out and seeking us. And it's a place that we can actually build emotional coping strategies so that we can go back and say, we're not going to just wait until you come in crisis, but we're going to actually teach you how do you deal with stress in the moment. And the goal of this is to teach emotional coping with a coach. And so that we start with the coach because the coach can then model these behaviors and can help athletes learn these skills in that setting. So the plan is we've designed this interactive toolkit, and I'll show you kind of where we are so far. And so this approach is really about building resilience, and resilience is a word we've probably heard a lot in the past few years, and sometimes it is talked about in a static way, and we're really talking about resilience that's changeable. And so that how can you build resilience? How can you develop this ability to manage stress? And we think about this with a biopsychosocial model, which, this is a very old way of thinking about this, but it's really helpful, I think, in terms of what are the different areas in which we can think about resilience. So from the biologic perspective, it's that you need to get good sleep, you need to have nutrition, you need to give yourself time to recover. We all know, especially as residents, as attendings, that there's times that you really haven't slept well, and when something comes on you that day, you are not in your best ability to handle that. Same thing, something before lunch, you haven't eaten, your body is not going to be able to handle that emotional crisis. The psychologic is also really fascinating. We know that you can build skills in this area, that if you really practice, how do I get my brain back into this moment? How do I work on resetting, breathing exercises, meditation, mindfulness, visualization? All of these things are actually, they're kind of a superpower. If you practice these, you do get better at focus. You do get better at coming back from an emotional crisis. And then the social piece is really fascinating. We know as adults, you get fired from your job, you're going to go home and you're going to talk to your partner, you're going to text your mom. You need that kind of social connection to help you manage stress. With a team, with a sports team, you have this built in, but that the coach really has the power to make that structure supportive. And part of that is aligning goals. You need to all be on the same page. And part of it is building trust. And we know this as teams that we work together. Can you rely on that person? Are they going to be there in that role that you need them for? There are things as a coach that you can do to make that even more powerful. So this is our timeline. So this is a relatively new project compared to some of the other work that you've heard about. This has only been going on since 2022. And that we started with really formative work. So we said, you know, we know some of this is the like the work that we're building off of is done in other populations, but we really need to go to high school athletes and high school coaches and see what they need. And so that's what we started with in 2022, which was these interviews, and then used that to develop a toolkit, which we've now is fully up and operational. And we're actually at this point, so we've started pilot testing. We're working with coaches in Ballard High School. We actually initially got some coach usability feedback about the platform, and we're now testing it. And we're just starting this week working with teams there. And then the plan is to go further from that is, you know, as you heard from Sam, refinement and scale, and really how do we build this in a way that's sustainable? How do we build this in a way that we can reach all kids? You know, and I will say these types of approaches, sports psychology, every professional team does this. You may not know this, but the Seahawks themselves had a mindfulness coach, Michael Gervais. So this is, you know, at the professional level, they know that this matters. Like you cannot perform as an athlete if you're emotionally dysregulated. You know, if someone like fouls you and then you lose it, you are not going to be a good athlete in that moment. And so we are trying to bring this to everyone. How can we bring this to the high school coaches that don't have these types of resources? And I've done this work, and, you know, as I said, I'm an adolescent medicine provider, so I do a lot of mental health in my own clinical work, but I also partner with Kevin Altschuler, who you see up on this slide here. He's a clinical psychologist who works in rehabilitation medicine and actually builds resilience programs for patients with multiple sclerosis. And he also sidelines as a sports psychologist. So he's working with these teams like Lake Washington football one-on-one. And so we take what he has made, this sort of Cadillac version of texting daily with a coach, and say, how do we make this scalable? How do we make this work so that we can reach everybody? And Leah Cantor up here has been the research coordinator who's working with us as well. And I will say this work, you know, we are really privileged to do this work. It's been supported by some funding from the Prentice family and also from the Garvey Institute for Brain Health Solutions. This is just to show you really briefly some of the qualitative work that we've done. It's more to say coaches are on the front lines. And this, particularly in the pandemic, was really amazing to hear some of the stuff they're talking about: suicide, disordered eating, anger, violence, anxiety. This is from the coach perspective. From the athlete perspective, 70% talked about anxiety. So there really is a huge amount of mental health distress. We had to make a decision, and we said, we are not going to make coaches into therapists, and nor should they be. But that what we said is we're going to work upstream. And how do we start? By like giving coaches and athletes the building blocks of how do you manage emotion. In sports are like a lab for stress. So we know you're going to encounter failure. You're going to encounter injury. You're going to encounter disappointment. Someone is going to foul you. You're going to have this physicality. You're going to have emotional distress. And if you can learn to deal with that, it makes it this less likely to have a mental health crisis. We also know that we can provide some off-ramp in this platform as well, and give the coaches resources of what do you do if you have a crisis. You can go here, and while we're continuing to give them this emotional intelligence. So this is the platform. This is just a screenshot of it. It is an interactive platform. I've been really privileged to work with Dane Ramshaw, who's at Techables down in Oregon. And so that we want to make this something that coaches are excited about and want to work with. So initially we're defined for them what is mentally strong. So we're calling this mentally strong. And I will say it is not mental toughness. The goal is not you should white knuckle through it. The goal is how do I know, like, where am I emotionally and what am I going to do with that? And maybe it's I need to go run around the track. Maybe it's I need to go splash some water in my face. Maybe it's like I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths. But this is a different level of really understanding your body, and it's something you can build in the same way you can build physical strength. We teach it through this platform. We also teach coaches about the stress response, wanting them to understand the physiology of this. And this is in an interactive way. So we say, like, the stress response is biological. And you all know this, that chemicals are dumped into your bloodstream when you have a stress reaction, and that you can't tell someone, don't be angry. That is not going to be effective. You have to help them move through that anger, let those chemicals subside, and then they're going to be able to engage. So this is an interactive a sort of a page that they can click on. This is just to show you, it will show you like what happens with stress in different parts of your body. So your pupils dilate, your heart beats faster, your lungs, your breathing is faster. And this is the whole platform is sort of designed that you can interact with it, because we find that is a better key for learning, is really like being engaged in the learning. This platform also, and I'll show you just here as so you go through these different psychoeducation pieces, and it's really focused on you as the coach matter. So your role as the coach is, one, to recognize that athletes are having emotional distress, two, to prioritize that, to think about what you can do in the moment, and also how you can set them up for success. You can talk about sleep. You can incorporate things like a quick breathing practice right before you start a game, so that they're like getting down into the zone, and that you can also model that behavior. So you can say, oh, I am angry right now, I need to take a moment. So that your role as a coach is really vital. And, one of the things when we talk to athletes, you can imagine what's the biggest thing that they talked about is like, the biggest thing that causes emotional distress is the coach yelling at them. And so, initially we said, I don't even know if we can tackle this. How do we get this? And I said, well, the way we do this is we model. We say, here's this athlete who's already at the top level of stress. And then if you yell at them, is that going to bring them down? It's probably going to make it worse. And so like, what are the things that you can do? So the scenarios, this is the really fun part here. So these are actually AI driven, so that we taught the computer to be an angry athlete, an upset athlete. You kind of feed it into this story. And then as the coach, you interact and you can say whatever you want and the AI will respond. So this is an example of a soccer player who misses a goal. He's upset, and you can see what we have. This is called the Yerkes-Dodson curve, which is that performance and stress are related. So we all know this. Like if you're not stressed at all, you're not going to study for that test. You need a little bit of stress. You need to say, okay, I need to study. But if you get too stressed, you can't even focus. You can't think of, you're frozen. And so the idea is the coach is like, okay, your goal is to be able to get this athlete back into the zone. How do you get them back into that place? And this is going to happen all the time in games. Something's going to happen, but you still got a whole game to play. How do you deal with that? So as the coach, you type something in here, and this is just sort of an example of like, you did your best, let's get back out there. There's another half to play. And you can see I was able to move him a little bit to the left, and you get 4 chances here, and you can actually get him into the green zone. The fascinating thing about this is I can't tell you exactly what to type, and that there's different strategies that work. So you can say, take a few breaths. You can say, you got this. You can say, your teammates all know that you're reliable. You can think about, there's a lot of different approaches to this. So we have 5 scenarios, which are a variety of sports and a variety of different kinds of emotional reactions. And then we actually have one that's unsolvable, because sometimes there is nothing that you can say, there's nothing that you can do to get an athlete down into a good level. And you have to know that you can call for help. So there may be times that you say, you're out, you need to come out, this is too much. You may need to call the parent, you may need to do other things. And so we were really also mindful about how do we build in, there are times when someone has experienced trauma, when they are going to have a different kind of emotional reaction, that you need to also think about that. And we built some of that into the platform as well to talk about. So I'm going to show a quick video. And so that one of the things I wanted to talk about is that when we started at this and we were, working on this sort of psychological strategies, as I talked about, breathing came up a lot, that athletes really already had used some breathing strategies, as a part of sport. Breathing is already a very natural thing to use. And I thought, oh, of course, I can find lots of videos online about using breathing for sport. That should be fine. And what I found is that a lot of the way meditation and mindfulness breathing are sort of talked about and explained is all about getting to this calm, relaxed space. And athletes do not want to get calm and relaxed. They want to get calm and focused. And that's very different. And so that we ended up making our own videos, because we said, we really need to have something that will speak to what is motivating to athletes. And the truth is, meditation and mindfulness, they are all about letting go of the past, not worrying about the future, being in the moment, which is the zone. That is exactly where you need to be as an athlete. So these are sort of perfect techniques. So this is a video. So what am I going to have to do this? Close down. but I have to get the sound.
It's already set.
Oh, it's already set up. So this is a video of a former NFL athlete. His name's Kerry Carter. So he played for the NFL and the CFL. He, as an athlete, used a lot of these strategies himself. He used meditation, mindfulness, visualization. He currently does work for the Advocacy Institute, which is actually a rugby-style tackling that is trying to improve safety in youth football. And he's sort of been a wonderful partner for us because he can talk about this as an athlete and really talk about how you use breathing for control and focus. So this is just a minute-long video where he describes some of the breathing techniques he does.
One of the breathing techniques that I use, especially when you're high
Volume. How do I get the volume up? Let's see here.
So you're going 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold, and it's long hold. So you're when you feel like you go in, you hold it, you're controlling the flow as it goes out, and at the end you're controlling it again. So it gives you the opportunity and that perception of control, and that really gives you ownership of that moment. And so you kind of get out of the state of mind where, you know, something else is happening that's in your attention or control, and it brings it back into you.
So that's my last slide. I'm really excited about this work. If you have anybody if you want to partner with us, if you have anybody that you think we should talk to, coaches, mental health providers, physicians, let me know. I'm always happy to talk to and collaborate and hear more voices. So thanks so much.
Well, good morning. It's my job to close things down and get everybody off to work. First of all, thank you all for being here. Thanks to those in the audience who have helped me with some of my most challenging patients. I'm grateful for that. Thanks to everybody at the Institute. We didn't get to hear Christine talk, which is even the parts that I understand when you talk, I think are good. But the Institute has done a variety of remarkable things, more than I ever thought would be possible. And his name is still Kerry Carter. He's relaxed. That's good to see. When Dr. Ellenberg and I started the Sports Institute, it was pretty much around safety, which I remember it was all about safety, and it's now expanded in ways which are quite remarkable. But we have not forgotten our mission around keeping athletes safe, either through mental health work and also through some other measures. I would like to take a few minutes and talk about some of the things we've done on the safety side. I need to have a couple of disclosures here. These are things in which I'm involved. The Concussion in Sport group is a group that writes international papers that Sam referenced. I'm going to speak directly to that paper, and I'm an author of that paper. I'm not biased, but the paper is awesome. So but I do need to disclose that so you understand my bias from where I'm coming from. This meeting that Sam talked about, this is where this most recent information came from, and the Institute takes information like this and makes it into teachable videos. I'm going to just kind of go through that, and I thought we might have a little bit of fun to close this out. In that meeting in Amsterdam, we covered 13 areas with systematic reviews and a consensus statement. I'm going to touch on a couple of them. How do you remove an athlete from play, and what do you do to reevaluate them? This is familiar ground to some of the neurosurgeons in this room who have served with us as unaffiliated neurologic consultants on the sideline. But things have changed. So the Sports Concussion Assessment Tool is the most widely used tool in the world to assess concussion. If you wonder what people say when they say that the athlete is going to undergo the first part of the concussion protocol, it's basically this tool. So it's kind of fun just to think about what's in this tool and then talk about how we put that into play. It's changed. So for those of you, it's a brand new tool and things have changed. So now when they say we're enacting the protocol, the first part of this tool is what we do on the field to see if the athlete can either be moved off the field or has to go to the emergency room. So what that entails when you see us huddled around or go into the blue tent, From the sideline, we look for observable signs, and these signs have been demonstrated, at least in professional male rugby players, to have a high prediction value for concussion. So when we look at the field, we're watching the game somewhat differently. If we see these signs, that usually triggers part of our emergency medical action plan for us to go on the field to play. We also keep in our mind red flags if we see these signs. These are certainly comfortable in this audience to know neurosurgical complications or potential complications. So this is in our mind. When we approach the field, the first thing we do if the athlete is unconscious is stabilize his or her cervical spine. But then you sort of do a modified Glasgow-Coma scale or AFBO. If the athlete's breathing and talking and oriented, you know your ABCs are intact. But our first goal is to look at their neurological status, which should be comfortable to everybody in this room. Before we do a further neurological examination, though, the discipline is to clear their cervical spine. If an athlete falls from standing height unconscious, you must assume a cervical spine fracture until proven otherwise, which is part of the rescue. That is the next piece. At that point, on the field of play, sort of looking at finger in the nose and looking at ocular motor movements is kind of a quick neurological screen. This all helps us decide, can we move the athlete, or does he or she need to be transported? Do we need to call rescue? If you can grab these initial memory questions, the Maddox questions, they're also validated to predict the possibility of being concussed. So data gathering on the field of play while you're doing a screen to decide transport or non-transport gives you tools which are helpful in trying to make the diagnosis. So this discipline is followed on the field of play. So if you wonder what we're doing to make the go, no go decision, this is the framework that we use. This has been changed a little bit so that the emphasis piece is now on field. Then if you take the player off the field, what do you do on an off-field assessment? So if you decide that you're not going to transport a player. So when we take a player into the tent or in the training room, we're basically looking at 4 different domains. We want symptoms, we want immediate memory, concentration, processing speed, balance, and delayed recall. So once again, the discipline of doing a concussion assessment is helpful. A symptom checklist, as demonstrated here, we ask the athlete in their own way for them to fill this form out. It turns out that there's really no one symptom that's predictive of recovery from concussion, including brief loss of consciousness or even brief amnesia. What is predictive, though, is symptom burden. So the number and intensity of symptoms is a very helpful predictor for recovery if you can capture this acutely. There's a lot going on. Those of you who've been on the sideline or in the tent with us understand that. But if you have the discipline to capture this information, it's helpful for you prognostically. Another thing it does, Dr. Chrisman, is it slows things down a little bit. Everybody takes a deep breath here. You give the athlete this to fill out, and the world just kind of slows down a little bit. So part of this is purposeful. You know, if you notice with an athlete, we don't run them off the field. We walk them off the field. We're doing some of the calming things that you mentioned because it is helpful just to kind of turn the thermostat down a little bit because it is stressful. And so that is, I just wanted to point out the power of what you were saying. We then ask other orientation questions. And it's helpful to see where the athlete is. And then we test immediate memory. We used to use a 5-word list. Now we use a 10-word list, which is a pretty big lift on the sideline. So in mild traumatic brain injury, auditory memory is affected more than visual memory, right? So it's harder for an athlete to hear a list of words and then have her repeat them to you. So this is a nice piece for us to look once again more specifically to see if the athlete can lay down new memory. 3 trials, the number correct really doesn't matter. The trending to be able to remember more on each trial is important. So administering this test correctly, we even on this form have given instructions, the exact wording that should be said. Concentration, asking an athlete to repeat a list of numbers backwards is yet another higher cognitive function and will help you see if the athlete is concussed. So you give them you say a list of numbers, they repeat them backwards to you. And then we ask them to do the months of the year in reverse order. This is never popular. Then they say, what? Like, what does this matter? Well, it matters because not only is it a concentration test, but now what's new is we're timing it. So that's his processing speed, which I think is a nice addition to this document. The speed of processing is yet another cognitive function that can be affected. So you bring them in, you make sure they're okay. You have them do a symptom checklist in their own writing. You ask them orientation questions. You ask them immediate memory questions, concentration questions, and speed of processing questions. So this is how this plays out. This is why this evaluation takes time. It continues for a look at balance, and this is the work of Kevin Guskowitz initially. Looking at balance is not a cortical or cognitive function, it's a cerebellar function. It says you can test another part of the brain because different parts of the brain can be involved in a mild traumatic brain injury. So we do a static test, modified best test, and we also do a dynamic test. So time tandem gait, and if you really want to be sophisticated, you do dual task gait. Obviously, I can't go through all these in the time we have, but I will tell you that this document is freely downloadable. And so if you want to look at this, or if you're ever going to cover sports and be responsible, I think you should look at this. So now we've taken the athlete off the field. We've gotten their symptom checklist. We've orientation. We've looked at immediate memory, concentration, speed of processing, and now a non-cortical or cerebral event. We've looked at balance, both statically and dynamically. A little time has passed now, and then we ask for delayed recall. So not only can the athlete lay down new memory, can she or he recall it? So the discipline of this examination, which takes at a minimum 10 minutes, is helpful to get data, which is useful for making diagnosis of concussion and also the opportunity to prognosticate on recovery. The higher the symptom load, the greater chance for the longer for recovery. We do this more than once. So we do it when it happens, maybe at halftime, and then after the game in 24 to 48 hours after the injury as well. This is a great tool, but it is a tool. And for all of my colleagues who have been with us on the sideline, I must tell you that the scoring on this test is not used as a standalone method to diagnose a concussion, measure recovery, or make decisions about athletes ready to return to sport. As good as this tool is, it is a tool. But an athlete can perform better after a concussion on the SCAT-6 than they might have on a baseline. As you said, Sarah, athletes are highly motivated to play. They might not be so interested in the NFL mandates that this be done as a baseline. They're more motivated when you tell them they can't play. So they'll really try. So even a SCAT-6 score that's better than baseline doesn't mean the athlete's not concussed. So as we sit here in 2024, the diagnosis of concussion remains clinical. There is no one tool, there is no one number, there is no one test. It's just a tool to help in the process. Another thing which is new, and I think which is important, is when the SCATs were designed, starting with I guess it was a SCAT-2, they were designed as a tool to assess concussion acutely. They were not designed as a tracking tool. They are not a tracking tool. They lose validity. So we made it clear in this document that this tool has an expiration date. You can use this tool really for the first 72 hours, and if you want to, up to a week. But after that, it loses its ability to help manage concussion. So it has been sort of misappropriated as a tool to be used long-term. It is not. But we did offer a solution for this in Amsterdam. We developed a new tool called the Sports Concussion Office Assessment Tool, which is beyond the time we had today, but if this is also freely downloadable. But there is a new tool now that you can use in your office to help you with the same discipline of examination for athletes as they move through recovery. It recovers different domains and provides a lot of questions. One of the things I'm most proud of, Sarah, is it provides a whole section on mental health and psychological questions, because this is always a psychological injury, and athletes with persisting symptoms often have a variety of issues. That's almost what they bring to the concussion. This is a much broader tool, and I think will be a contribution that will need to be validated, but this is what came out of Amsterdam. Once again, references, this is freely downloadable if you want to flip through it. I will, to do this examination correctly in an office, is about 45 minutes, which I know is sobering, but I've never been able to assess brain injury. Actually, 45 minutes is not enough, but you just have to plan for the time. If you're going to get in the brain injury business for sports, you have to plan for the time to do an assessment. I don't have to tell this audience this, you're brain injury experts. The Sports Institute has taken information like this and put it into videos so that it can be easily disseminated. And we learned, excuse me, we learned a lot about this in terms of how to make those videos. I was told very politely that an elderly old man droning on a camera is probably not the most effective way to teach people. I didn't take that too personally. I'm almost over that now. So we got professionals, actually the same group that did the commercials for the Mariners distillery, and made this teachable and in content that was understandable. We made it free, and I'm happy and proud to report that they've been widely adopted. We've done one on the scap, which we're going to have to update, and we also did one on cervical spine. And just to finish, I thought we'd just show a brief little video of this is part of the cervical spine assessment. One of the most challenging things is how to take equipment off a football player, and so we made video that can be used by emergency room physicians, athletic trainers, and others. This is a little clip of a different way to remove equipment. Usually it's an 8-person equipment lift. This is a 3-person removal.
Cervical spine stabilization is vital to maintain throughout equipment removal. 2, 3. Great. Now we'll remove the shoulder pads. In on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, just go ahead and lower him to the ground, lower him back down. And Rob, you may transfer control of the C-spine to me. I've got it. And then we'll apply the anterior portion of the cervical collar and Velcro the straps. Okay, team now will resume normal care of the station.
I'd like to thank our friends in the emergency room for allowing us to be part of the rescue there too. And our practice and emergency medical action plan includes trying to work with them to make sure that all aspects of the athlete's care are in order. I could go through several videos, but in the purpose of time, and we will not do so. Listen, Sam, thank you for your friendship and leadership, and thanks to everybody in the Institute for making me a lot better than I ever thought I could be in understanding many aspects of sports medicine. Thank you all for listening. It's been a pleasure to be part of this, and I find it so sustainably interesting. And thank you for letting us tell you our story. And I think we should get people to work on time. Thank you.